Hey, this is Loral. We're on our fourth part of our four-part series with Jim Britt. We're talking about letting go, unleashing your wealth. How do you create more joy and self-mastery in your life? This last one is fabulous. If you need approval, you will always be broke. It's sort of a saying along the lines of, I always say, if you expect perfection and you work for perfection, you will also be broke. Jim and I are going to break that down and talk about why you need approval, why you expect perfection, and when you need control because you're out of control. So how do you know what you're really controlling, or is it just a self-fulfilling fantasy that's just honestly keeping you in trouble? Next, when you really let go, meaning you have no attachment to the consequences or the impacts, you actually have more power. And then how do you learn to move forward without permission from other people? How do you start self-initiating actions, decisions in your life to get what you want? Let's listen in.
And I've helped a few men too, but I've helped a couple of hundred women out of abusive relationships. And it's based on upbringing and what they went through as a child. And now it came down to being a victim in an abusive relationship for the need for approval. Now, I asked one crowd one day, I've mentioned this to a crowd, and a woman says, well, I bet you I can tell you something that's not approval or control. And I said, okay, give it to me. She said, I have a messy office. I said, okay, why do you have a messy office? She says, well, I'm really busy. I said, well, are you really busy? Are you really productive with that busyness? He said, yeah, pretty much. And I said, or maybe you're trying to make people think you're busy, and having a messy office helps you to look busy.
That's funny, actually.
She just stopped for like a minute. She goes, oh my God, it's a need for approval. I'm cleaning my office when I get home.
So, Jim,
I'd like to wrap up with a couple minutes of something that I think would be really helpful for people. Years back, my friend and I, we used to read the same books, and then we'd get on the phone and talk to each other about what we got from the book, try to learn from each other. This was about, 35 or so years ago. And one day before we hung up, he said, hey, Jim, do you know what the word resourceful means? And I said, hey, maybe using your imagination, be more productive. I said, I never thought about it. Why? He said, it's just an interesting word. And I said, yeah, I guess so. We hung up. And a few hours later, I was driving home, and I couldn't quit thinking about the dumb word resourceful over and over and over. Of course, we didn't have Google or anything, so I went to the dictionary and looked it up. And it was defined as once again full of source. And I thought,
like that.
That's interesting, depending on what you think source is.
Right.
So I looked up the word source, and it said where all things originate. I thought, not some things, but all things. I went, wow, that could be really powerful depending on what you think source is. So I kept looking for another definition. I went to the bookstore the next day. I looked in origin of words. I couldn't find anything. I looked in another dictionary. And occasionally I'd look up something trying to find it. And I was in the UK doing an event out for a walk one day, and I see this bookstore. It had a sign on the back door that said antique books. I'm going, yeah, I love old books. So I walked in the back door. There's a dictionary about a foot thick. And it was all tattered on the edges. I don't know how old it was. I didn't look at the publication, but it had a sign that said, do not open. And I justified it by saying, that's probably for people in the UK. So I opened it. and I looked up, got the S's. I was careful. And I looked up the word source. And I saw some of the same things that I'd seen before. And suddenly one definition popped out, source, love. And I went, once again, full of love. But wow, all things originate in love. And I left, and I'm walking down the street, and I kept thinking about that. What does that mean? How do you apply that to your life? And I thought, when you decide you're going to do something and nothing less than that will do, you fall in love with it. And that creates the passion to keep you moving forward.
Yeah.
So, wow, once again, full of love. And I walked on a little further, and I went, wait a minute, there's a flaw in that definition. Mm-hmm. If all things originate in source or in love, where does fear come from? Walked on a little further, and I'm going, oh, I get it. We fall in love with fear. We create it ourselves out of source and fall in love with it. And then I left there, and I went to Toronto for an event, and I was out for a walk again the next day with the friend of mine that we read the books together. And we were walking pretty fast, getting back to the hotel. We were running a little late. And there was this presence right behind me, somebody walking in step with me, and so close that I could smell him. I was just about to turn around and say, hey, buddy, back off a little bit. And he started talking in two different voices. The one voice, he said, and God created man. The other voice says, yeah, well, I know that. He said, yeah, but then God created woman. He said, yeah, I know that too. He said, but then God created fruit. And the other voice goes, what the heck does fruit have to do with anything? He said, well, inside this fruit, there's a seed. And he said, if you plant it, it will grow. And if you don't, it won't. And then he turned and went the other direction. And thinking about that, I thought, well, you plant, when you make a decision, you're planting a seed. And you got to nourish it just like a garden. If you're nourishing a garden, you got to keep the weeds out. You got to let go of the things that's holding you back, that's draining your energy, taking the nutrients out of your soil or out of your plant. So you got to let go of that stuff and move on. So I thought we plant a seed when we make a decision, and it's not a goal.
Nope.
I don't really think about goals because it's out there someplace.
Yeah.
The decision is in the moment, and in the moment is where we take action. We can't take action out there someplace. Without the decision, forget the goal. All of the storyboards and all the things that people do is useless unless you make the decision to back it up. So,
and the decision to let go. So Jim Britt, it's been great having you on Loral's World Money Talks. How can people follow you, get a hold of you?
They can reach me at jimbritt.com, jimbritt.com with 2 T's.
Okay. And go check that out and follow him, follow the power of letting go and put it in your life. I would challenge you to really look at that and where can you let probably the most draining thing go before the 4th of July, this 4th of July week while we are recording this. So you'll be hearing this in the next few weeks. And those of you who have any question at any time regarding my work, questions about money, being in business, starting a business, how to do money rules, anything around money, go to askloral.com, ASKLORAL, askloral.com, ask a question, make a request, and we'll be back next Friday with another episode on Loral's World Money Talks. Jim, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure, Laurel. Thank you.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed this 4-part series. For those of you that had a great experience with it, go back and grab 1 through 4 in the last 4 days. Share it with as many people as you can. Subscribe to this channel, click the notification button, grab all 4, note it in your sharing with everyone. They need to come listen to this because so many people are stuck. They won't let go. They live in the past and they wonder why they can't move ahead. If you have any questions, go to askloral.com, ASKLORAL, ask a question, make a request. We'll be back tomorrow.